Dad doesn't live here anymore. That's what Chloe said. Not, he can't stay right now. Not, this is a bad time. She looked me dead in the eye through the security screen and said it like I was a stranger who'd gotten the wrong address. My name is Andrew Ford. I'm 66 years old. I built Ford Electrical Services from nothing, just me, a second-hand van, and a contractor's license I nearly killed myself studying for at night after 10-hour shifts. 34 years. I wired half the homes in Ballarat. I employed 31 people. I had a reputation so clean you could eat off it. 3 weeks ago, I lost everything. The banks called in 2 major loans simultaneously, no warning, no grace period. 3 commercial clients canceled contracts the same week, citing compliance concerns that nobody could explain in writing. My public liability insurer voided my policy over a technicality buried in paperwork I'd signed 8 years ago. Lawyers told me to file for voluntary administration. The company I'd bled for since I was 32 years old was gone in 11 days. I lost the house to the receivers, lost the work ute, lost the office in Wendouree I'd been leasing for 19 years. I had a 2009 Camry, a suitcase, and $80. So I drove to my son's house in Alfredton, the house I'd lent him $60,000 toward, the house with the double garage and the sandstone letterbox and the security screen door that Chloe was now staring at me through like I was collecting for charity she'd already declined. Chloe, my voice came out steadier than I felt. I just need a few nights, that's all. Alvin's at work. I know, I came to talk to you both. Can you open the door? She didn't move. Andrew, we knew this was coming. We talked about it. Alvin and I both agreed we can't take on someone else's financial problems right now. We've got our own commitments. Someone else's financial problems. I was her father-in-law. I was the man who paid for their wedding reception. I was standing on her porch with a suitcase. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking for a roof for a few nights while I figure out my next step. And then what? A few nights becomes a few weeks? We don't have the space, Andrew. She glanced behind her, nervous or pretending to be. I'm sorry, I really am, but you need to talk to Centrelink. They have programs. She stepped back from the screen. Andrew. The interior door closed, not slammed. That would have meant something. Just clicked shut, politely, like the end of a customer service call. I stood on that porch for I don't know how long, long enough for the sensor light to turn off, long enough for me to understand that I was not going to go back in there and knock again. I drove 3 blocks, pulled into a side street off Gilly Street North, and sat in the dark. I am not going to tell you I cried. I'll tell you I sat there for 2 hours and didn't move. I'll tell you that at some point I reclined the seat and pulled my jacket over myself like a blanket. I'll tell you the Camry's heating cuts out when the engine's idling too long, and October in Ballarat drops to 7 degrees at night. I'll tell you I kept looking at my phone, half expecting Alvin to call. He didn't. I spent the next 2 days parked in different spots around the city. BP on Howitt Street during the day, bought 1 coffee, sat in the corner booth for 5 hours. Woolworth's car park overnight. You learn fast which security guards will move you on and which ones won't bother if you're in a corner spot and the car is clean. I was parked out front of the Meijer on Sturt Street at 5:50 in the morning. I'd been awake since 2, too cold to sleep, when a car pulled up alongside me. Not just any car, a black Mercedes S-Class, current model, in the CBD of Ballarat before 5 in the morning. The window came down. The man behind the wheel was older than me, dark suit, white collar, built like someone who'd done hard work once and never entirely lost it. He looked at me the way people rarely look at a man sleeping in a Camry, not with pity, with recognition. "Andrew Ford?" he said. I didn't answer immediately. You get cautious sleeping rough, you learn.
"Who's asking?" "My name is Ingram Skinner. I work for Ainsley Perkins." He paused to let that land, but it didn't. I didn't recognize the name. "Mr. Perkins has been trying to locate you for 9 days. He's in Ballarat Base Hospital, private wing. He's dying, Mr. Ford, and he says there are things that need to be settled before he goes." Ingram's eyes didn't leave mine. "I don't know anyone named Ainsley Perkins." Ingram nodded slowly, like he'd expected that. "He knows you," he said, "quite well as it turns out. He says to tell you, March 2003, the Creswick Road site, the substation fire." The blood left my face. I knew exactly what that meant. I hadn't thought about that day in years, hadn't let myself. "How does he—" I stopped, swallowed. "Give me a minute." I grabbed my jacket off the passenger seat, ran a hand through my hair, looked at myself briefly in the rearview mirror, and decided not to do that again. "All right, take me to him." The last thing I saw as I got into Ingram's car was my own reflection in the Camry's window, hollow-eyed, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd slept in for 3 nights. I had no idea that in less than 48 hours I would be signing documents that would change everything, not just for me, for Alvin. Comment the city you're reading from. I want to see how far this reaches.
The private wing of Ballarat Base Hospital smells different from the rest of the hospital. No disinfectant bite, no anxious energy bleeding through the walls, just quiet, the kind that costs money. Ingram walked me through it without a word, past the nurses' station where nobody looked up, past original artwork on cream walls, into a lift that required a key card, up to the 6th floor. He stopped at the last door and knocked twice. "Come in." Weak, but certain. The man in the bed was maybe 80, maybe older, built like someone who'd once been solid, wide shoulders, thick hands, but time had hollowed him out. What was left was mostly eyes, sharp, pale blue, the kind that had been reading people for 6 decades and hadn't stopped. He looked at me, and something in his face relaxed, like he'd been holding his breath, and finally let it go. "Andrew." Not a question. "Sit down, son." I pulled the chair to his bedside, looked at him carefully, trying to place him anywhere in my memory. "Mr. Perkins, I have to be honest with you. I don't know your face." "No," he said. "You wouldn't. We've never met in person." He reached for a glass of water beside him, and I watched his hand shake as he lifted it. "But I've known who you are for 22 years. Since Creswick Road." "Since Creswick Road." March 2003. I was 44. Ford Electrical was still small. 6 employees, 1 van each, a decent reputation, but nothing spectacular. We had a subcontract on a commercial development off Creswick Road, wiring a new warehouse complex. The site foreman that day was cutting corners on the switchboard installation. I could see it. The primary contractor, Sparky, was rushing the substation connection, wrong cable rating for the load, and he'd skipped the earth fault loop test entirely. I flagged it twice. He told me to mind my own work. I walked off the job, took my crew with me, called the Energy Safe Victoria hotline that afternoon, and lodged a formal report. 2 days later, the substation caught fire. The fault I'd reported caused it. The building was a shell before the trucks arrived, but because the site had been cleared for the evening, because it happened at night, nobody died. Nobody except the primary contractor's license, which was revoked within the month. And nobody except my relationship with that contractor's network, which blacklisted me quietly across 3 regional districts for the better part of 2 years. I'd done the right thing and paid for it. I'd filed it under "that's how it goes" and moved on. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing, was that the building that burned that night was owned by Ainsley Perkins. I was in Sydney when it happened.
I had 2 site managers and a head contractor telling me it was an electrical fault. Bad luck, these things happen. The insurance would cover most of it. He paused to gather breath. Talking cost him something. But I'm not a man who accepts these things happen without knowing why. You looked into it. Took me 3 months. My solicitor tracked down the ESV report. Your name was on it, date stamped 2 days before the fire. He looked at me steadily. You saw it coming. You reported it. You pulled your crew off a job that would have paid your rent for 6 weeks because it was wrong. It was the law. Don't do that, he said quietly. Don't minimize it. I've been in business 40 years, Andrew. I know how many men see something wrong and look the other way because the money's good. You didn't. I didn't say anything. That building was insured, Ainsley continued, but what wasn't insured was the development timeline. 12 months of delays, contracts lost, a partnership that fell apart because confidence collapsed. He exhaled slowly. And none of that was your fault. But your report is the reason nobody was hurt. A night shift crew was supposed to be working late that evening. They knocked off early. If they hadn't... He stopped. Neither of us needed him to finish. I tried to find you back then, to thank you, but you'd gone quiet. No website, just a local number. By the time my people tracked you down properly, you'd moved on, and I told myself the moment had passed. A pause. I was wrong to let it pass. He reached over to the bedside table, slid a manila folder toward me with deliberate care. I haven't let it pass again. I opened the folder. The first document was a financial investigation report, dense, detailed, dated 6 months ago. I skimmed the header and felt the room tilt slightly. Subject: Ford Electrical Services Pty.L., commissioned by Perkins Group Holdings. He'd been investigating my company. Keep reading, Ingram said. The report outlined a coordinated sequence of events, not bad luck, not market forces, a pattern, precise, deliberate, timed. The loan recalls, the contract cancellations, the insurance policy challenge, every one of them traced back through cell companies and third-party intermediaries to a single point of origin. I turned the page. At the top of the next document was a name I recognized. My son's name. My chest went cold. This is wrong, I said. My voice came out flat. Whatever this says, it's wrong. I know how it feels. I know exactly how it feels. Read the next page. The next page was a signed contract between Alvin Ford and a property acquisition company called Meridian Asset Group, dated 12 months ago. In it, Alvin agreed to provide material non-public information regarding the operational and financial position of Ford Electrical Services Pty.L. in exchange for staged payments totaling $180,000. 14 months ago, Alvin had been selling information about my business for a year before the walls came down. I put the paper on the bed, couldn't hold it anymore. There's more, Ainsley said quietly, and I need you to hear it all. But first, he looked toward the door. Ingram? The door opened. Ingram came in carrying a tray. Hot tea, toast, a bowl of soup. I stared at it. When did you last eat a proper meal? Ainsley asked. I couldn't remember. Then eat first, he said. What I have to tell you next, you need to be steady for it. I picked up the spoon. My hand was shaking. Outside the window, Ballarat was waking up. Orange light across the rooftops. A city I'd spent my working life in, wiring its homes and businesses, pulling cable through its walls. And somewhere across that city, my son was waking up too, in the house I'd helped him buy, with no idea that the dying man in this hospital bed had spent 6 months dismantling every lie he'd built. Ainsley's next words were the ones I never saw coming. Not about what Alvin had done to my business, about what he and Chloe were planning to do next.
What Alvin did to your business, Ainsley said, was phase 1. I put the spoon down. There was a phase 2. The second folder held a power of attorney form. My name, my date of birth, my signature at the bottom. I had never signed anything. They practiced it, Ainsley said. Chloe sourced legal document templates online. Alvin pulled old invoices and birthday cards you'd signed over the years. Months of work. He let that sit. The plan was to wait until you were completely broken, no business, no home, nowhere to go, then offer to take you in. Present it as generosity. In exchange, you'd sign over legal authority to manage your affairs. And once they had that, Chloe had already identified 2 private psychiatrists who conduct capacity assessments. With the right framing, financial failure, homelessness, instability, you build a picture that looks convincing on paper. The tribunal grants conservatorship. They control your finances, your medical decisions, your living arrangements. He paused. You'd be housed, fed, and completely powerless. I sat with that. That night on the porch, you need to talk to Centerlink, Andrew. They have programs. I'd thought it was cruelty. It was preparation. Grind me down far enough, then arrive with the solution already written. Why not just ask me for money? I said. If they were drowning, why not come to me? Ainsley looked toward the door. Wanda. Wanda Schultz came in without ceremony, late 50s, gray suit, the manner of someone who'd spent 30 decades in rooms where the decisions stuck. She sat across from me and opened a document wallet. $340,000 in unsecured debt, credit cards, a personal loan, a line of credit against Chloe's car. Their mortgage is underwater by $67,000. She slid a spreadsheet across. And over 34 months, Alvin withdrew $163,000 from Ford Electrical through falsified contractor invoices. He installed remote access into your accounting software 3 years ago, told your bookkeeper it was a security update. I looked at the spreadsheet, columns of small amounts, nothing that would have tripped an alert on its own. While I was cutting my own pay to cover staff superannuation on time. Alvin also sold your tender figures, Wanda continued. 9 occasions we've documented. He'd ask you about upcoming jobs over Sunday dinner. What's the pipeline looking like, Dad? Then sell your numbers to competitors for between $4,000 and $15,000 a time. I remembered those conversations. I'd been proud of them. Thought he was finally taking an interest. Wanda pulled out a printed phone transcript, date and time stamped. Recorded call between Chloe and her sister in Brisbane, 6 weeks ago. I read it. I won't repeat most of it. What I'll tell you is this. Chloe told her sister that men like Andrew Ford, tradies who stumble into something, hold on out of stubbornness, not ability, that they'd been patient long enough, that the plan was almost done. She used the word comfortable, not guilty, not afraid, comfortable. I folded the transcript and set it on the blanket. How long have you known? 6 months, Ainsley said. I tried to move quietly, shored up one of your credit lines, reached out to a contact at your insurer, but Alvin had inside information. Every time I plugged one hole, he'd already found another. Something moved across his face. Not quite guilt, close enough. I wasn't fast enough to save the business. I'm sorry for that. Outside, Ballarat was fully awake. Ordinary morning.
trams, school run. The city I'd spent 34 years wiring, crawling under houses in the middle of winter, showing up the morning after my mother's funeral because a family in Sebastopol had 3 kids and no power. And Alvin had spent 3 of those years reaching into the till. "Why are you doing this?" I asked Ainsley. "You could have handed this to the police. You could have done nothing. It's not your problem." He held my gaze. "You saved the lives of 2 workers on that Creswick Road site. They just didn't know it. Neither did you." He reached for the folder he'd kept closest to him throughout, the one he hadn't opened yet. He opened it, and everything changed. What was inside that folder didn't just give me my life back. It gave me the power to decide what happened to Alvin's.
The document on top was a property title, 23 Dunwich Street, Alfreton. Alvin's house. "I purchased the mortgage 3 months ago," Ainsley said, "through a subsidiary. Alvin has been making his repayments every month without knowing who he was paying." The faintest trace of satisfaction in his voice. "He's been paying you, Andrew. He just didn't know it yet." I stared at the title. "There's more," Wanda said. She laid out 3 further documents in a row like cards on a table. "Mr. Perkins also acquired the debt collection rights to Alvin and Chloe's 2 largest credit accounts, combined balance of $218,000. She tapped the 3rd document. "And this is a formal evidence package. The falsified invoices, the tender disclosures, the forged power of attorney, the recorded call. Everything documented, sourced legally, ready for submission to Victoria Police and the Australian Taxation Office." I looked at the spread of paper on Ainsley's blanket. My son's entire life, laid out in documents. "You own their house," I said slowly. "You hold the debt, and you have enough evidence to put them both in front of a magistrate." "You own their house," Ainsley corrected. "You hold the debt, and yes, the evidence is yours to do with as you choose." The word choose landed heavily. "I'm leaving you my estate, Andrew." He said it plainly, no theater. "The Perkins Group, the properties, the investment portfolio. Wanda has the figure. She'll walk you through it after I'm gone. It's substantial, more than you'll need." He watched my face. "I don't have children who deserve it. I have children who've been waiting for it. There's a difference." Wanda placed the will in front of me. Clean document, thick paper, already witnessed. "My son Elbert and my daughter Sybil will each receive $1, Ainsley said. "They know I'm dying. Neither has visited. Elbert called last week to ask whether the Toorak property would be part of the estate. Sybil's lawyer sent a letter requesting an inventory of assets." He exhaled, slow, tired. "You see the picture?" I saw it. 2 families, 2 old men, children who looked at their fathers and saw a balance sheet. "I don't know how to accept this," I said honestly. "You don't have to know how," Ainsley said. "You just have to decide what you're going to do with it." He settled back against the pillow, something easing in him, like the hard part was done. "Harold left instructions. I'm leaving you something better. Options. What happens to Alvin is yours to determine. The law gives you remedies. I've made sure you can afford to use every one of them, or none of them." "You're not going to tell me what to do?" "I'm a dying man, not your conscience," a ghost of a smile. "Though I will say this, I've watched what revenge does to people. I've done it myself, once, in my 40s, to a business partner who deserved it. Won completely." He paused. Felt nothing. Worse than nothing. I looked down at the property title again. 23 Dunwich Street. The sandstone letterbox. The security screen door. Chloe's face behind the glass. "Dad doesn't live here anymore." I felt the anger move through me, clean and cold, like water under ice. But underneath it, something else was sitting. Something that had been there since I left that porch. Grief, I suppose. The particular kind that comes from finally accepting a thing you've been refusing to see. Alvin hadn't become this overnight.
It had been building for years. The casual questions, the distance, Chloe's quiet contempt dressed up as refinement. I'd seen it and explained it away every time because he was my son, and you do that. You explain it away until you can't anymore. "How much time do you have?" I asked Ainsley. He considered the question seriously. "Days, maybe less." "Then I'm not leaving." He looked at me. "You found me sleeping in my car," I said. "Least I can do is sit with you." Something crossed his face that I wasn't expecting. Not gratitude, deeper than that. Relief, maybe. The relief of a man who'd spent his final weeks surrounded by lawyers and silence and had just been told he wouldn't finish alone. "Ingram will bring a chair," he said quietly. Ainsley Perkins died on a Thursday morning, 4 days later. I was there. Ingram was there. Wanda was at the end of the bed with her hands folded. No family. No flowers sent. No calls returned. His last coherent words the evening before were directed at me. "Don't be smaller than they were, Andrew. That's all." The will reading was the following Tuesday. Elbert Ramos arrived with 2 solicitors and a valuation consultant. Sybil Madron came alone, but spent the 10 minutes before the reading on her phone. Neither of them acknowledged me beyond a brief, dismissive glance. The shabby man in the corner, presumably a staff member or a witness. Wanda read the will without inflection. When she reached the clause leaving each of Ainsley's children $1, Elbert stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. When she read my name, the entirety of the remaining estate, to Andrew James Ford of Ballarat, Victoria, Sybil made a sound I won't describe. I sat still. Not because I felt nothing, because I felt too much to move. The legal challenges came fast and loud and ultimately went nowhere. Ainsley had been meticulous. Psychiatric evaluations, video testimony recorded 6 months prior, a paper trail of our connection going back to 2003. Wanda had spent the better part of a year making the will unassailable, and she had done her job. 8 weeks after the reading, the estate was mine. I didn't move into anything grand. I took a short-term lease on a furnished flat in Soldiers Hill. Nothing fancy. A view of the Eureka Center if you angled right. A kitchen that worked. I needed somewhere quiet to think, because now came the part I hadn't been able to think past. Alvin. I held the mortgage on his house. I held his debt. I held documented evidence of fraud, forgery, theft, and conspiracy, enough to end his life as he knew it before the end of the month. Or I could do something else entirely. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of me, and I thought about a boy who used to fall asleep in the back of the work ute on long drives home, who'd worn my old tool belt around the house when he was 7, dragging it on the floor because it was too big, who cried at his grandfather's funeral even though he'd barely known him, because Alvin always cried at things he felt deeply, and I had loved that about him. Where had that boy gone? More to the point, had I done anything or failed to do anything that helped him disappear? I didn't let myself answer that too quickly. I picked up my phone and called Wanda. "Draw up 2 letters," I said. "One to Alvin, one to Chloe. Tell them their mortgage company needs to meet with them about an irregularity in their account." I paused. "Don't use my name. Tell them the new account manager will attend in person." "When?" I looked out the window at the Ballarat afternoon. Gray sky, a city that gave me everything and watched me lose it. "Tomorrow evening," I said. "I want this done." I drove to Dunnet Street the next day knowing 2 things. I owned everything they had, and I still didn't know what I was going to do about it.
I parked across the road at 6:15. Sat there for a while, engine off. The house looked the same. Sandstone letterbox, native garden Chloe had put in 2 summers ago. I'd helped her carry the plants from the nursery. Double garage, both doors down. Lights on in the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom above the porch. Ordinary Thursday evening. My son inside, probably eating dinner. I got out of the car. Wanda met me at the door. She'd arrived 10 minutes earlier, playing it straight. Mortgage company representative, routine account review. Alvin had let her in without question. People always let the suit in without question. I walked through the front door of my son's house for the first time in 3 years. The interior was exactly what I'd have expected from Chloe. Expensive taste, carefully maintained. A leather sofa that cost more than my first van. Artwork on the walls that nobody had chosen because they loved it. Family photos on the mantelpiece, Alvin and Chloe's wedding, a trip to Bali, Christmas at Chloe's parents' place in Geelong. Not one photo with me in it. They were sitting on that leather sofa when I came in, Wanda across from them, documents open on the coffee table. Alvin was leaning forward with his polite, cooperative expression, the one he used with authority figures. Chloe had her hands folded, ankles crossed, managing the situation. They both looked at me. Alvin's face did several things in quick succession: denial, recognition, something that wasn't quite fear but was heading there. "Dad!" Barely a sound. Alvin. I sat down in the armchair across from them. Wanda closed her folder and moved to the side. Chloe. Chloe's composure held for a moment longer than Alvin's. Then it didn't. "How are you—" She stopped, recalculated. "What is this?" This is a conversation we should have had a long time ago, but we'll have it now. I didn't raise my voice. I want to be clear about that. There was no point at which I shouted or broke down or said anything I hadn't already decided to say. I'd had 4 days sitting beside a dying man and 8 weeks alone in a flat in Soldiers Hill to work out what this moment needed to be. I laid it out plainly. The accounting software, the falsified invoices, $163,000 over 34 months, the tender figures sold to competitors, the coordinated collapse of the business, the loan recalls, the contract cancellations, the insurance challenge, all traced back through Meridian Asset Group to a paper trail that ended with Alvin's signature. The forged power of attorney. The plan to have me declared incompetent. With each item, I watched my son's face change. The denial phase lasted about 90 seconds. "Dad, that's not— you don't understand. It wasn't like—" Then Wanda opened her folder and started placing documents on the coffee table, one at a time, and the denial stopped. Chloe went very still. She was reading the transcript of her own phone call upside down from across the table and understanding precisely how much we had. The mortgage on this house was purchased 3 months ago by a subsidiary of the Perkins Group. As of 6 weeks ago, that subsidiary and everything it holds belongs to me. I let that register. I own your house, Alvin. I hold $218,000 of your unsecured debt, and I have a complete evidence package ready to submission to Victoria Police and the ATO. Alvin's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat on his knees. "Dad!" "Let me finish." He went quiet. I also have a choice about what to do with all of it, and that's why I'm here. Not to tell you what I've decided, but to give you the same thing you were going to give me. A choice, except mine comes with 2 honest options instead of 1 rigged one. Wanda produced the final document and placed it on the table. "Option 1, I said. "I submit the evidence package tomorrow morning. Victoria Police, the ATO, the Victorian Building Authority. Fraud, forgery, theft. Wanda estimates a realistic exposure of 6 to 9 years, given the premeditation involved. I foreclose on the house simultaneously. You lose everything within a month. Neither of them spoke. Option 2. You sign this agreement tonight. You acknowledge what you did, in writing specifically, no vague language. You sell this house voluntarily and move into something you can actually afford on your salaries. The debt repayment schedule is in the document. 60% of your combined disposable income monthly for 15 years. I won't charge interest, but I will have full visibility of your finances for the duration. I paused. There's one more condition, not financial. Alvin looked up. Every month you write me a letter, handwritten. You tell me what you've understood that month about what you did, not what you're sorry for. I don't need your apologies. I need to see whether there's any part of you still capable of honest thought. I held his gaze. Because the truth is, Alvin, I don't know who you are anymore. I'm not sure you do either, and I think that's worth finding out before I decide whether you're worth forgiving. The room was silent for a long time. Chloe spoke first. I hadn't expected that. What if we refuse? She said, quiet, careful, still calculating. Then we're done here, I said, and option 1 starts tomorrow. She looked at Alvin. Something passed between them, not the conspiratorial signal I'd seen in other couples caught out. Something raw. 2 people suddenly looking at each other without the story they'd built together. Alvin picked up the pen. His hand was still shaking when he signed. Chloe signed below him without looking at me. I stood up, picked up my copy of the agreement, buttoned my jacket. I looked at the mantelpiece, all those photos, Bali, Geelong, the wedding, every chapter of my son's adult life documented carefully, and not one image of the man who wired his first bedroom switch plug, who taught him to drive in an empty car park on Remembrance Drive, who worked every hour God sent so that Alvin Ford would never have to know what it felt like to have nothing. I'd been edited out. I thought about putting that into words, decided it wasn't necessary. He knew. I'll expect the first letter within 30 days. I walked out through the front door, down the driveway, across the road to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and didn't start the engine for a while. No triumph, no relief, not yet. Just the particular exhaustion of a man who has done the hard thing and is still not sure if it was the right thing, and the particular silence of a street at night where your son is sitting inside a house you own, holding a pen he just used to sign away the life he stole. I started the car, drove back to Soldiers Hill, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, and waited to find out what kind of man my son was going to decide to become. 6 months later, I read his 4th letter. It was the first one that didn't sound like a man writing to avoid prison.
Nothing special. Weatherboard railing, a pot plant Ingram had brought over as a housewarming gesture, 2 plastic chairs I'd bought from Bunnings for $12 each. But in the mornings, when the light came over the ridge and hit the Eureka Center just right, it was the best seat in Ballarat. I drink my coffee there every morning now. I'd had 6 months to get used to the money. I'm not sure you ever fully get used to it. What I got used to was the absence of the weight, the low-grade anxiety that had lived in my chest for 30 years, the mental arithmetic that ran constantly in the background. Payroll, insurance, quarterly BAS. whether the Kenworth needed new rear tires, and whether that could wait until February. Gone. All of it gone. What replaced it wasn't happiness exactly, more like stillness, room to think without the noise. I'd started a small consultancy, nothing ambitious. I wasn't rebuilding an empire, just advising small electrical contractors on compliance, tendering, business structure, the stuff I'd learned the hard way over 3 decades. Charged reasonable rates, turned away clients I didn't like. For the first time in my working life, I chose who I worked with and walked away from who I didn't. It turned out that was worth more than the money. Ainsley's estate had been complex to settle. Wanda managed most of it. She was efficient and unsentimental, and I trusted her completely, which was a shorter list than it used to be. Albert Ramos made noise for about 6 weeks. Then his solicitors apparently advised him that the case was unwinnable, and he went quiet. Sybil Madron sent one letter through her lawyer, formal and cold, requesting a goodwill payment in recognition of family contributions to the Perkins Group. I asked Wanda to respond with a polite no. I did set up a charitable foundation in Ainsley's name, trades apprenticeships for kids from regional Victoria who couldn't afford the full training costs. It felt right. It was the kind of thing he would have dismissed as sentimental and then quietly approved of. Ingram Skinner stayed on. He'd been with Ainsley for 35 years and had nowhere particular to be. I didn't need a driver. I was a Sparky from Ballarat. I drove myself. But I needed someone who knew how Ainsley operated, who understood the structure of what I'd inherited. Ingram understood it completely. He was also, as it turned out, good company. Quiet when quiet was needed. Willing to say difficult things plainly when they needed saying. He reminded me a little of myself at his age. The letters from Alvin came on the last Friday of each month, handwritten as agreed. The first 2 were short and careful, the writing of a man choosing every word for its legal and emotional defensibility. Technically compliant, completely hollow. The third was longer. He wrote about selling the house, the actual experience of it, packing boxes, the removalist, standing in the empty living room before they handed back the keys. He wrote that it wasn't until that moment, standing in a room stripped of everything, that I understood what I'd felt standing on his porch with a suitcase. I made you stand there, Dad. I watched you through the glass, and I told myself it was necessary. I don't know how I believed that. I read that paragraph 4 times. The 4th letter was the one to change things. He didn't write about the debt repayment or the apartment or the second job he'd taken doing project management for a small builder in Sebastopol. He wrote about his grandfather, my dad, Alvin's pop, who died when Alvin was 14. He wrote about a memory I'd forgotten I'd told him, his grandfather driving home from a job in the middle of the night to fix a pensioner's fuse box because she'd called the after-hours line and was scared of the dark. Didn't charge her, didn't mention it, just came home, made toast, went to bed.
I used to think that story was about being a pushover, Alvin wrote. Now I think it was the whole point. That was just who he was. And I think it was who you were, too. And somewhere along the way, I decided that made you less than me. I've been trying to work out how I got there. I don't have the answer yet, but I'm asking the question now. That's new. I folded the letter and put it with the others in the drawer beside my bed. I called him on a Sunday morning in April. He picked up on the second ring. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The particular silence of 2 people who have said too much and not enough and aren't sure which direction to move in. "I got your letter," I said. "Yeah." His voice was different, quieter than I remembered. The performance was gone, the smooth, managed version of Alvin that had been operating for years. What was left sounded younger somehow, more like the kid with the tool belt. "Your pop would have liked hearing you remembered that story." A long pause. "Dad," his voice broke slightly on the word, just slightly. "I don't expect anything. I needed you to know that I know what I did, Not just legally, what I actually did to you. I looked out at the deck, the morning light, the Eureka Center catching the sun. I know you know, I said. Another silence, easier this time. How's the Sebastopol job? I asked. And something shifted, small, fragile, the kind of thing you don't put weight on yet, but there. We talked for 40 minutes, about work mostly, safe ground. He asked a question about compliance documentation that was actually a good question, and I answered it properly, and he listened the way he used to listen when he was young, and the world was still something I knew more about than he did. When we hung up, I sat on the deck for a long time. I wasn't ready to forgive him. I want to be honest about that. Forgiveness isn't a decision you make. It's something that happens, slowly, in the background, while you're doing other things. It wasn't done yet. But the door was open, barely, an inch, maybe 2. That was enough for now. Ainsley's last words had been, "Don't be smaller than they were." I thought about that sentence every day since, turned it over, tested it. What he meant, I think, was this: the easiest response to betrayal is to become it. Match the smallness you were shown, burn everything, take everything, leave nothing standing. There's a clean satisfaction in it, a feeling of accounts settled. But you become the thing you burned. I'd spent 66 years being a man who showed up, paid his bills, did the work properly, walked off a job once because it was wrong to stay, and never knew that decision would echo forward 22 years and change everything. That's the part that stayed with me most. You don't know which moments matter when you're in them. You just do the right thing because it's the right thing, and you carry on. And somewhere down the road, maybe decades down the road, it turns out that nothing you did was wasted. Not one day of it. I finished my coffee. The light was fully up now. Ballarat moving through its morning. The trams, the school run, the tradesmen heading out with their vans, the way they do every day in every town in this country, quiet and unheroic and essential. I went inside, washed my cup, put on my jacket. I had a meeting at 9, a young electrician from Maryborough, 28 years old, just taken on his first apprentice and drowning in paperwork. Reminded me of myself at that age, competent at the work, terrified of the business. I knew exactly how to help him. That was enough. That was, it turned out, more than enough.